I was on the verge of burning out, of leaving the teaching profession when I left North, because I didn't know that there was any other way I could do this. I didn't know that there was a way where I could, not be pulled in 50 different directions, and I could focus on my students. I could focus on my curriculum. And CART really taught me that I can be a good teacher if I'm given the support and the time to do that. And I want my other teachers in Clovis Unified to be able to do that. I had a friend who said, "Why are you doing this? Things are good for you at CART." And I'm like, yeah, but I know that they're not good for people other places.
Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of the ACE Pod, a production of the Association of Clovis Educators. This episode, I talked to Moira Harada from CART. And what's interesting about Moira's ACE journey is that she's in a really good situation at CART. CART is in an innovative place with lots of teacher agency, smaller caseloads, a supportive and engaged administration, and an abundance of resources. But ACE recognizes that we're all in this together, and we all deserve this sort of institutional culture. I hope you enjoy this conversation as she discusses her journey from Clovis North to CART, and CART's unique and powerful partnership between Clovis Unified and Fresno Unified. So let's get to it. Moira, welcome to the ACE Pod.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get started. So let's just start with your Clovis Unified journey. How did you get to CART?
So it was kind of a long and meandering journey, but it started with the fact that I grew up in Clovis and went to Clovis schools through junior high through high school. I was actually a member of the first graduating class at Clovis East, where I believe you taught.
I did teach, but we never crossed paths, did we?
No, I don't think we did.
Yeah. That's taken me back a ways.
How was that? Your first few years teaching, or?
Yeah, I mean, what year did 2005?
You graduated in 2003.
2003.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I started maybe a little earlier than I think I started in like 97, 98. But
okay.
Yeah, working at Clovis East was my first job at a comprehensive high school. So yeah, it was pretty early in my career.
Fun. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Even at Clovis East, I kind of always knew I wanted to be a teacher. And in college, I kind of meandered around to a bunch of different things and eventually came back to teaching. I got my teaching credential at Fresno State, and it was the height of the recession. So there were not a lot of teaching jobs available, and I wasn't expecting to get hired straight out. I did my student teaching at Buchanan for final student teaching, and it was really fun. And then my husband, we had just gotten married when I finished the credential program, was getting a master's up at Humboldt State. So we were separated for like a month or two, and then I moved up there after finishing my credential. And I subbed for a bit and eventually was hired to work in a classroom at the Humboldt County Juvenile Hall through an AmeriCorps program called Youth Serve. It was a very, very eye-opening, interesting experience. It's a lot smaller than the juvenile hall here. It's like max 40 kids in the whole facility, and girls and boys were both kind of there. They had like a girls' wing and a boys' wing, and then the classroom was a mix of all of the students, and they were all in independent study. When my husband finished his program, we moved back to Clovis because he actually got an internship at Clovis Unified for school psychology. And we moved in with my parents because it was an unpaid internship and I didn't have a job, but I had applied to Clovis North for an English teacher position, my credentials in English. And I happened to know the LD. She was a former drama teacher of mine, Jennifer Enns. And I did the interview and a couple of days later, I actually got the job, and I kind of couldn't believe it because, like I said, teaching positions were really hard to find at the time. So I just like went all in. I was just like, whatever you want me to do, I will do it. Just, I'm so grateful to have a job. And I taught there for about 4 years, and it was kind of rough. Like, it was a lot. I taught senior English, and I remember the first day I was like, I was hired like a couple of weeks before school started, and they just handed me like a Brit Lit book, the like new 11th, 12th grade initiative binders, and this ERWC binder. And we're just like, go make your curriculum. And
just go for it. Yeah.
Just go for it. Yeah. And I was the only regular 12th grade teacher at the time because they had just had their first graduating class the year before I got there. And we're still building and moving into open rooms and stuff like that. So it was kind of rough because I didn't have anybody to like bounce ideas off of. My dad had just retired teaching English at Clovis East, and he was teaching 12th grade. So he kind of like bounced ideas off of me, but I was pretty alone for those first few years, especially. And I did everything. I was Asian club advisor. I think I was also the anime club advisor. I helped out with drama productions, doing costuming and assistant directing. And then I got talked into doing 504 coordinator for 11th and 12th grade. And my son was born in 2014. And after he was born, I just really kind of hit a rough patch where I felt like I was having to choose between being a good mom and being a good teacher. And I was also kind of pressing up against the limits of stuff that I wanted to do with like technology. I was trying to move more into Google Docs and all of that kind of stuff. And it was just, I was expressing a lot of frustration with my position at the time online. And a former of mine, Rachel Coots, actually was teaching at CART. And she reached out to me and said that there was a position opening up in the Law and Policy Lab and recommended that I apply. And I never went to CART. It was open. My brother was actually one of the first people in the first class when CART opened in 2000, I believe. But it sounded cool. And it's like technology and project-based learning. And so I mentioned my previous experience teaching at juvenile hall, and I thought maybe I could work this. I've been teaching argumentative writing as the main focus for 12th grade, and that's kind of like legal writing, and I was just willing to learn more. And so I dived in, and they actually hired me, and that's how I got to CART.
That's an amazing, like, you have no you had no legal experience, right? So
no, in the state of California, you have to have either a social science credential or an English credential to teach CTE law.
All right, very cool. I'm sure having that kind of argumentative writing background probably really helped, but also kind of the experience of doing all these different things as a young teacher, right? Probably kind of was I imagine was quite rough, but also maybe kind of buoyed your confidence, right? If I could do this, I could do this.
Yeah. I'd done so many things at that point. I was just like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And it's been one of the best things I ever did.
Yeah. And then you're also bringing up kind of all these like Clovis East, like people, right? Rachel, your dad, Jennifer Enns, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of all these people from the kind of the early, wild West or wild East, as it were, right?
Well, it's so funny. When I was doing my or before I did my student teaching, I was doing some credential classes, and I actually ended up subbing, and they actually kind of hired me on a like every other day basis to help Gabe Teninehouse do a SAT prep class. And so like just the number of Clovis East references in my life and the number of Clovis Unified references in my life just continue to compound. I work with Adam Higginbotham, who taught AP U.S. history, which I didn't take because I didn't finish the summer project, but he doesn't hold it against me now.
Back in the old days when they wouldn't let you in the class if you didn't do the summer project.
Yep.
Yeah. Now it's just like, come on in. We'll worry about that summer project later. Yeah. All right. So, now you're at CART, and, obviously it was a a really good move for you. So just talk about what do you love about your job at CART?
Oh my gosh, so much. I think the biggest thing is the amount of time and ability to connect with students on a one-on-one or small group basis. When I was teaching at North, I had 5 sections of close to 40 kids, sometimes over 40 kids each. So like 180 kids total. And me as a teacher by myself trying to connect with all those kids. I mean, I made the connections, but I'm sure that there were still kids that I never had a personal conversation with once in the entire year, just because you're so busy. And at CART, we have 2 kind of periods. We have an AM section and a PM section, and the classes can be anywhere from 50 to 70 kids. But because of the way CART's organized, and because I'm also co-teaching with 2 other teachers, I get 3 hours a day with that classroom of kids. And if I'm not doing direct instruction, I'm helping out while one of the other teachers is doing direct instruction. So I can be popping around at tables and helping kids and having those connected moments. Or if a kid's having a really hard time, I can take them out in the hall and talk to them about what's going on. It's just a structure that allows me, one of the best parts of teaching for me, to be able to have those relationships with kids.
Yeah, it just sounds like such a creative space, right? And it's just such a unique and just so different from what we kind of imagine the classroom to be, right? And, English teachers all across the district and probably all across the country are like, hey, I have, 180 students, 200 students. I know, like I work with English teachers that have 220, 230 students, and trying to kind of manage that load and grade essays. And then as you are kind of, talking about right now, is kind of meeting them in the small spaces, right? And getting to know them on that kind of personal level and being able to kind of devote time directly to them. It's just not a luxury that, kind of in the traditional settings.
It's definitely something that the kids will sometimes tell me, oh, I like CART so much better than my homeschool. And I try to remind them that the things that they get at CART, or the things about CART that is structured the way it is, make it easier for me to do the things that I know engage them, and to give their other teachers a break, because they have a lot more on their plate and a lot more expectations than I do. The other thing is with the project-based learning and a lot of the group stuff, I spend a lot less time lecturing and a lot more time having the kids do kind of exploratory learning on their own. Like, we set up the parameters and we coach them through it, but they do a lot of the find the question, figure out the research, figure out the answer, formulate it, present it kind of stuff. And oftentimes we'll break up the class into, smaller groups, and then I'll mentor a certain number of groups. So I got really close with those kids in that project. And then maybe in the next project, I mentor a different set of groups. And so it's easier to connect there too.
Right. All right. So we have this kind of, incredible and creative and innovative space. And maybe we should kind of back up a little bit and just let you kind of explain like the school a little bit, because it is so kind of different from kind of our, these kind of the enormous comprehensive sites that we have. So let you just kind of spend some time doing that.
So CART actually hit its 20th year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know, right? We got shirts and everything. And it's a really unique school. Oftentimes, I actually have to point out to people that it's not a school. It's technically a program, because we're not a comprehensive site. But we are what's called in the legal world, joint powers association between Fresno and Clovis Unified. And basically that just means that half of our staff is CUSD and half is FUSD. And we try to reach the same for our students. So we draw juniors and seniors from every high school in Fresno and Clovis Unified. Some people think that we only take the smart kids, and that makes it easier. But
she's putting that in quotes.
Sorry, air quotes. Smart kids.
Yeah. So go ahead. Sorry,
I forget I'm not going to be seen.
Yeah, audio. Yeah.
But the only actually requirement to get into CART is that you attend a Clovis or Fresno school, you have a 2.0 grade point average, and you are on track to graduate. And then it's a lottery system. Basically, we have like a certain number of spots. So in the law lab, I have a certain number of spots for set aside originally for each high school in Clovis and Fresno. But say, kids from Clovis High are just not as interested in law. So then maybe we don't get as many of those kids applying, and those spots then go to wait lists for other schools. So we can get kind of a diverse mix. It's always been interesting to me. Our Fresno Unified tends to be our larger group in our AM section, and then our PM section tends to be larger Clovis Unified. And I don't know why that kind of rounds out the way it does. But the kids apply online. It's a lottery system. They put their top 3 choices for a lab. Most of the time, they at least get into the school. I don't remember our numbers off the top of my head. I think it's like something like 2,000 something. So it's like roughly half of that is Clovis and half is supposed to be Fresno. We try and work it out that way. We have 14 different labs, and each lab has a career and technical education focus. So we have everything from law to biomedicine, environmental lab, psychology, multimedia and graphics design, robotics and production. It's really, really cool. And each lab is a team teaching experience. So you have 3 teachers in the lab. You have the teacher who teaches the subject matter, which is actually an elective. So I'm an elective teacher for law. Every kid in every lab gets English. It's 11th and 12th grade combined because the standards are the same. It's actually an honors English if you come to us. And then you either get a science subject, and that's kind of like the south wing of the building, or a social science subject, and that's the kind of north wing of the building. So like in forensics, you get a special forensic science course credit that is kind of like a mix of physics and chemistry and some advanced other sciencey stuff, because I'm not a science teacher, sorry. In my lab, the kids get government first semester and econ second semester, and that's what my co-teacher teaches. But the awesome thing is that they get the subject matter classes and standards through the lens of the lab that they join. So in my class, everything is through the lens of law. And my GovEcon teacher and my English teacher do a really good job coordinating with me. So like our first project is constitutional law. The kids are getting, governmental foundations, the Bill of Rights, all that fun stuff. But then I'm teaching about the Supreme Court and how those, fundamental rights are challenged on a daily basis, and how that works in the real world. And my English teacher is reading a book with them, a dystopian book. I think we use Anthem by Ayn Rand. And they get to look at a world where those rights are not, available. And what does that mean? And so it's really fun. And then second semester, my economics teacher does a really good job of coordinating with our criminal law unit. So he does like supply and demand, but like crime wise, and it's kind of fun. So each lab also has industry partners that come in as guest speakers or mentors, or some of the labs actually do internships. I know our marketing lab still does internships. It's harder for law because of legal restrictions, but we have a lot of guest speakers, and we have one project in particular where we have about 40 members of the Fresno Bar Association, lawyers and law students who come in and mentor our kids. And then there's the technology aspect, and each kid is given access to a laptop while they're on campus. We do share the laptops between our AM and PM kids, so they can't necessarily take them home, but we do have laptop checkouts for kids who need it. And also they get access to a lot of industry technology, like in our robotics lab, there's like 3D printers and, all the stuff used to make robots.
I've been to CART puts on like the fairs or whatever.
The showcase. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are remarkable. If you haven't been to one of those, you need to go. Right. So yeah, you can see, what kids are creating and kind of all these different labs. The 3D printer stuff is remarkable. Yeah. It's very cool. And then my son is in 7th grade. And he's gone to, or for a couple of years in a row, he went to the summer camps.
Oh, yes, Summer Academy. I taught.
And he did the movie making camp 2 years in a row.
Awesome.
He loved it. Yeah, it was very cool. He learned, like, he can use Adobe Premiere. So yeah, it's very cool. So you have this kind of really unique site, and then there's this kind of really unique circumstance, right? Where where Fresno Unified and Clovis Unified are. That was the first time I've ever heard
the Joint Powers Association.
Joint Powers Association, where not only do you have Fresno Unified and Clovis Unified students together, but you also have Fresno Unified and Clovis Unified teachers, right?
Yeah, I actually, in my lab, it's we have 2 Clovis teachers and then 1 Fresno teacher. Our English teacher is a Fresno teacher.
And is it the equally divided, like the teaching staff?
It's equally divided as a whole school. Individual labs have different setups.
Yeah. And so obviously this brings up some kind of unique circumstances, and kind of, obviously ACE is an organization that is running kind of an organizing drive to unionize Clovis Unified.
Yes.
And you work at a school that is half union, half FTA, and, currently half not. And brings up some interesting contrasts, right? So
yes.
What are some of the contrasts that you've noticed along the way?
So this year it's been made especially more apparent because we have had to balance between the 2 districts about reopening and hybrid, and especially if you have 2 teachers at the lab from one district and one from another, and one is saying, we're opening, and the other is saying, no, we're not making our teachers go back right now. It's kind of hard. You have to definitely have that balance. The other thing, I kind of always knew, when I was hired in Clovis Unified, I knew that we were paid less. Like, that was kind of common knowledge. But at the time it was like, oh, we're paid less, but you get good support and you have a really great benefits package and all of that stuff. And I started to notice, I want to say maybe 2 years ago, when we were getting all of these comparisons for picking new co-pays and fees for our medical plan. And I was talking with a Fresno Unified teacher, and I was like, but our plan's better than yours. I mean, this is how much I pay. And he's like, I don't pay that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, no, I pay this much. And we both have the exact same size family. And I was like, well, your co-pays are higher, right? Or you have some deductible or something. He's like, nope. His co-pays were lower. And that kind of started to get to me, because it was like, we're all contracted. We get an extra period stipend. We're there for the same amount of time. We have the same amount of kids. We have the same amount of extra duties and everything else like that. And I was like, well, if our benefits packages aren't better, how much more do you get paid than I do? And this year I sat down with a friend of mine, Kat, and she was like, well, let's look it up. I'll tell you how much I get paid. I don't care. And I went on, we decided to go on with this website called Transparent California, because it has all the data for public employees and stuff. And especially with kind of the union things, I was like, well, I know this kind of tangentially, but I want to know exactly what it looks like. So the most recent data they had was from 2018. And we sat down, and it was like, she had been working for Fresno Unified at that time for 6 years, and I had been employed for 10. And she, for teachers who know the salary schedule, had a BA plus 40 units. And I had BA plus 75, which is as far as you can go over on the salary schedule without having a master's. And at that time, she made a full $10,000 a year more than I did. And that's benefits, pay. The only place I made slightly more than she was I get a larger stipend, but still the overall total she was making $10,000 more than I did. She's halfway through the salary schedule, whereas I'm all the way over, and she has less experience than I do. And it just hurt a little bit. I'm not going to lie. It stung. It was just wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing, right, to to know, hey, we're Clovis Unified. We have kind of these, like unique programs that like allocates money elsewhere. And we know that we're kind of less paid than, that high school that's in that other district. But when it's the teacher that is like in the classroom, like right next door to you, or
in the classroom with
lab.
me.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just like,
that
grief.
That definitely, kind of smarts a little more than kind of normal.
And she and I started talking, and like, I know that when I was doing 504s, I found out that different 504 coordinators at different sites were paid different amounts for their stipends. And she was like, oh, in Fresno, every single extracurricular thing, it's based on time. It's not based on if it's coaching. It's not based on if it's this or if it's that. You all get the same stipend. And so understanding for me, especially how much control my individual site had on determining what people were paid. And it's like, I'm doing okay. I'm not suffering for money. I have a spouse who has a decent paying job, but there's got to be some level of like, is that fair to be asking people to do the same amount or more work and to not be paying them what they're worth? Like, that's problematic. And I'm sure that other people are hurting. They don't have a spouse with a full-time job. They don't have, they have more kids than I do, so they have to pay more on their plan. They have more health issues, so they have to pay the higher copays that keep going up. And it smarts to see what it could be almost every single day and to have to think about that now that I know it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost something that you wish you'd never like open that, right? Like, let's not look at this. I'd rather not know. I'll just blissfully live in ignorance. And, we keep saying, we've talked about it on this podcast before that, compensation is not the thing that's driving us as an organization. It's not the thing that has led us to ACE, but it's just not. It's foolish to say that it doesn't matter. Of course it matters, right? Compensation definitely matters. I see kind of, my coworkers who, are single income homes, right? That have to just pile on, the work, because just to kind of, maintain that standard of living, and then they're kind of overworked, right? And then their performance is degraded because of that. So like, clearly it's important. Clearly it's an issue we need to talk about, and it's just the truth. Right?
Yeah. What other, like I said, I have enough units to have a master's. What other industry has, master's level professionals who are not paid what they're worth? I mean, I had a friend, I remember she started in private industry with just a BA out of college, and like insurance or something like that. And she was making like what I was making after teaching for 5 or 6 years, like just right out the gate.
Yeah. And then, to know that the person like teaching with you that, is not as far over on the salary schedule, and just, and
then I looked at their salary schedule and where I would be if I worked for Fresno, and that hurt too. I was like, oh man.
Yeah. And I mean, they get to kind of that high end much quicker than we do, right? And the disparity between years 15 and 25 is quite large. That doesn't mean, right, that like ACE is gonna, when we become the union and we kind of use kind of survey the membership and what are important, what are our priorities as a group, as a membership. That doesn't mean that we're going to get kind of huge raises. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden we're going to become, that's never been an aim of ACE. But the truth is not something we should be afraid of. And the truth is, right, that we are paid less than the folks or the teachers in our area, the educators in our area. And then when you compare like districts, that's just the truth. And we shouldn't be afraid right? To have a conversation
Well,
about.
and as a teacher for me too, it'd be like if I was getting paid less, but I knew that was because our class sizes were smaller and they were using that to hire other teachers. Or if I was getting paid less and I knew it was because we needed to hire more social emotional counselors on our campuses for kids. Or if I was getting paid less, but I knew, like, I mean, there's a lot of different things. And it's just like the compounding issues where those things aren't happening that makes it even a little harder.
And I think like this needle's at a point, right, that we've tried to make over and over again is kind of like transparency, right?
Yeah.
Why is it that we are, what is kind of making us the least paid kind of educators?
Well, where is that money going? You know, why do I have to talk to teachers at other sites to find out that they make a different stipend than I do? Why do I have to talk to teachers at other sites to find out that their class sizes are smaller or they're this or whatever? And why is there such wide disparity between locations in the same district?
Yeah. Yes. All right. So speaking of differences, right? So you've worked at kind of two kind of different places to vary. So you've worked at a comprehensive, one of our centers, right? That's a kind of comprehensive traditional high school. And then you're currently working in this really kind of unique and innovative environment. So like what do you see as the differences between those two sites?
There are a lot. And I understand going into this that I work at a choice school, kind of an elective program. And I understand that our funding is different and there are other things. But I honestly, when I left North, I was on the verge of possibly leaving the teaching profession. I was so burnt out and I just didn't see that there could be another way. And CART showed me that there could be another way. And it did that in a lot of areas. One of the first things is student caseload. I still have, like I said, 60 to 70 kids in a class. So I could have, if, we have 2 sessions, I could have on my load max like 140 kids. On average, I usually have probably more around 130, but that's still 40 kids less than I was teaching at Clovis North. And you don't think 40 kids is a lot, but when you're grading essays, oh man.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It makes a huge difference. It's just like the amount of time I get to spend on each paper or the amount of time I get to spend. Right now, the kids are writing witness statements for our mock trial. And I can go in and I can get in with the nitty gritty and I can point out the kids' grammar and I can make recommendations. And it's just, and especially co-teaching with those kids, it's like, it's amazing the difference. Extracurricular expectations are different. CART, I still have extracurricular stuff. We have parking lot duties. We have recruiting. I have to a couple of days a year. I have to go recruiting out at I go to Clovis North actually to recruit kids to in 10th grade to want to come and see what CART is about and apply. We have parent information nights for parents who are interested in having their kids come and they want to know more about the program. We have our annual showcase, which you talked about. Yeah. And oh man, that's a huge event. We have over 1,000 people come through our facility on that one day and night in January. And then usually each lab has an extra showcase either in the fall or later in the spring to show off their projects. But at North, I mean, whoo-wee. So I wasn't required to coach or do 504s. I'm going to use those air quotes again, required, but it was heavily encouraged that I have some sort of extra outside of the classroom responsibilities, and club advisor was not enough.
Yeah.
So
in particular, right in the infancy of you were there pretty early on in its life, right?
So they had their first graduating class in 2011, and I was hired for the 2011-2012 school year. So right after that, and things were building. And it was, I've seen teachers hired specifically because they could coach something. Right. And then you get wrapped into it and you feel like you can't say no and, all of that stuff. So I got pulled into doing 504s and I had a huge caseload of kids, like 50 11th and 12th grade 504s of plans I had to monitor. I had to have a meeting for every single one every year. And it basically took up my entire prep.
Wait, you were teaching a full-time like APU, right? 5 sections.
5 sections, and I was giving up my prep for 504.
Wow. That's a lot. And you were like, this was pretty early in your career, right?
Oh yeah. Like I think like my second year I took on 504s or something like that. So maybe at the end of my second year or third year, because I finished BITSA, they did let me get through that. And then I got this thrown on me.
Yeah.
And I was also, of course, you have kids. I was expected to have, we have our lunch. I'm using air quotes again, but I was expected to be available to help kids. And it was sometimes the only time that they could come in. And I was expected to be available after school. And I had kids who were like, please be our club advisor. And there were no Asian teachers on campus at the time when I was at Clovis North. I think they hired some at the junior high level, but so my husband's half Japanese. My adopted sister is Hmong, and I have some passing relationship with the Asian culture. So I felt like, they needed an Asian club and they needed an advisor and nobody else would do it. So, you have all these things where it's like for the kids, and you just keep piling it on, and you have, assigned duties at dances and sports games, and you have to be out there monitoring, and it's rough. I'm not saying that CART has no duties. Like I said, we have still our requirements, but the amount that it feels like we're expected to do is different. And I left Clovis North partially because I felt like if I said I wasn't going to do 504s anymore, something not so great might happen. And I'm just, I can't blame that on anybody. Nobody ever said that to me, but it was definitely a feeling in the air. I'll just put it that way.
Right. Yeah. I think we've been involved in ACE long enough to hear a lot of teachers talk about kind of that feeling, right? That feeling, right? If I don't do this or if I do that, something bad's going to happen. Right.
Yeah. It weighs on you, you feel like it's pushing on you, and you're trying to push through and keep doing all this stuff and being the good teacher. And, kids ask you to go to their sports games and they ask you to go to this, and you're trying to be a good teacher and show up and do those things. And I just feel like I'm able to do that stuff a lot more with CART, even though I'm, driving halfway across Fresno for a dance recital because it's a Roosevelt kid or on this side of town, or a Clovis East kid on that side of town.
That is, that like where I'm diverting here a little bit, but that's got to be a really kind of interesting experience, kind of the kind of diaspora of like students, right, from all over the Fresno County, right, from Fresno and very kind of disparate groups of people coming together in this.
It's funny because it dispels for me and for the kids a lot of stereotypes. I think that they both have about those rich Clovis kids, or those poor Fresno kids who are uneducated or whatever. And then you have it's one of my best things about CART is seeing kids come together. And I remember one year there was this particularly close group of friends, and I think they were all from like 5 different high schools, and they all went to each other's graduations at the end of the year, and we're driving across town to hang out. And they're like, I had kids who've been like, I'd never even been past, Willow or something like that to the other side of town. And it's pretty neat. It's pretty neat. It's also interesting.
That sounds amazing. That sounds really neat. Cause I went from Buchanan High School. I worked at Buchanan High School for 1 year, which is a long story. And then, 2 years later, I was working at Roosevelt High School. Right. So I went from, at the time, kind of the most affluent, school in the area to, kind of the school with the lowest socioeconomic status. And, we had almost, close to 1,000 at Roosevelt, close to 1,000 students who were designated English language learners. So, and it was literally Buchanan the year I was there was the first area or the first high school in the area to top 800 in the API. And that might predate you as a teacher, but that was kind of our, the state kind of metric for how good you were. So the higher was the better school you were. I'm using air quotes now. And so I went from the high school that had the highest API to the school that had the lowest, and in just a matter of a couple of years. And the kids at Buchanan were amazing. I had a great time with them. And then the kids at Roosevelt were amazing. Obviously very, very disparate circumstances and experiences. They brought different strengths and weaknesses with them to the classroom, but both sets of kids had strengths and weaknesses, and and then same thing with the teaching staff, right? I was only at Buchanan for a year, but kind of a dedicated, strong teaching staff. And then, I will say this, to kind of like, as long as I'm a teacher, and as long as there's this kind of pervasive negative view of Fresno Unified, the most dedicated and talented teaching staff I've ever worked with was at Roosevelt High School. They had to run really, really fast just to kind of make little progress, right? And the challenges they face every single day, the challenges that the kids face every single day, are hard to kind of fathom, on this side of town sometimes, right? The circumstances are at times quite dire. So
we definitely have that. It's so interesting. We have that. I remember one year we had a kid who had a brand new Tesla, and then I had another kid who was sleeping on couches because their brother had been shot in front of their house and they didn't feel safe there. And they were just like couch surfing to other places. And so just, kids are kids, but some have different things to deal with. And I'm not saying the kid with the Tesla had nothing to deal with. He had, his own stuff, but it's just that wide range. And I think that having the kids mixed together, allows them to see that as well, and allows them to humanize each other as more than just stereotypes. And it also brings up a lot of issues because we're a technology school and we do provide the kids with laptops at the school, but like dealing with the technological divide of who has what at home has been an interesting challenge that we continue to grapple with at CART. I will say in class, the technology is amazing and a lot easier to deal with than it was at Clovis North. We do most of our stuff digitally. We use a lot of Google Classroom, Google Docs. We were in a pretty good place right before the pandemic hit because we had some experience with all this stuff. And I just remember at Clovis North I was pushing it, wanting to do some more of this kind of stuff with computers. And I remember doing a research project at the end of the school year. I would do a controversial issues research paper. And I had to either schedule time, down in the computer lab, which was hard to get, into, or I'd have to roll a giant cart of laptops into the elevator to get it upstairs to my room and then push it down the hall and find a place to plug it in. And then we didn't have enough plugs in the room for the kids. And I had, like 6 periods back to back, and the laptops would lose charge. And I remember one year I had reserved them in advance, and then they're like, "Oh, by the way, we need these for testing. You can't have them anymore." And they took them back.
Yeah. A couple things about the pandemic, right? I just want to, kind of celebrate. I want to celebrate the educators, right? It sounds like you've been kind of tech savvy and kind of, were easily transitioned into the pandemic, and I certainly feel that was the case for me. But a lot of our colleagues, right, that wasn't the case, right? And this was, and they learned, things that were uncomfortable, and they did it quickly, right? Learning to teach over Zoom was very difficult, but then also like everything through Google Classroom, everything digitally when you're used to, kind of collecting papers. So I think that's kind of a heroic effort by quite a few teachers.
Oh yeah.
for many of us, it was a little bit easier of a transition. I mean, staring at Zoom all day wasn't great, but
no.
yeah, the other kind of aspects were fairly easy. And then the second thing is, man, I hope we learn some lessons from this. And my fear is that we're going to learn nothing. But I mean, how much money I bet somebody knows, but how much money we've saved in just paper.
Oh, yeah. I remember going to like a tech boot camp when I was teaching at North. It was actually hosted at CART, and it was this, the paperless classroom.
Yeah.
And it's like, I want that.
Yeah.
and now I have it, and it's amazing, but it didn't come without a lot of infrastructure and resources. I mean, I know the stereotype is that North is the new school, and we did have a lot more technology. I had the actual, I got a doc cam for the first time, and we had some of the other stuff, and it was all built in. But at the same time, I'm still having to cart all those laptops up. And I think one lesson from the pandemic is we apparently could have afforded to get kids laptops and hotspots a long time ago.
Yeah. Yes.
And why didn't we?
Right. I mean, and that's just about priorities, right?
Right.
And I think those of us doing the work in the classroom, right, and on the ground educators, working with kids every single day, could have said, 5-10 years ago, hey, this is the future. This is where we're going. We need to invest in this. We've done a lot better the last couple of years, building kind of tech infrastructure. And then obviously the pandemic really kind of accelerated the need.
Yeah. I just kept thinking, I hope that a lot of these kids get to keep their laptops, because that'll make homework. We try not to give too much homework, but that'll make homework a lot easier. And then the other thing I wanted to backtrack to is I just want to give 3 cheers to you teachers at traditional ed sites. In my room, I have a team. So if something goes wrong with Zoom, or a kid needs help getting in and I'm doing direct instruction, I have 2 other teachers that I can be like, hey, hop on with blah, 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 and get him connected. I can't stop. Right. And I don't know how people who are in their own classroom by themselves are doing everything. They're teaching, their tech support, their, whatever else it is. And 3 cheers to you guys. Seriously. Yeah.
I mean, it is definitely, juggling. And often it's flaming chainsaws. I don't even know if that is a thing. Flaming chainsaws. Could you imagine?
Yes, doing the juggling on a T-Rex.
Yes, I would pay to see the guy juggling the flaming chainsaws on the T-Rex. So, Moira, so as to close this segment out,
Sure.
Why are you signing the union support petition?
So like I said, I was on the verge of burning out, of leaving the teaching profession when I left North, because I didn't know that there was any other way I could do this. I didn't know that there was a way where I could, not be pulled in 50 different directions, and I could focus on my students. I could focus on my curriculum, and CART really taught me that I can be a good teacher if I'm given the support and the time to do that. And I want my other teachers in Clovis Unified to be able to do that. I had a friend who said, why are you doing this? Things are good for you at CART. And I'm like, yeah, but I know that they're not good for people other places. And I also still see the disparities, even for us. I was treated differently than my FUSD staff during this last year, and it was dramatically apparent. And I want CUSD to be what it can be. I want it to be better. I want it to be what it was promised to be. And I want those smaller caseloads of students so that we can really say it's people, not programs, so we can really say it's every kid has a shot. Every kid deserves the support. And I just don't feel like that's the way things are right now. When I have kids in Clovis Unified who say, I'm trying to talk to them about next year, and they've been trying to get into their counselor for 2 or 3 weeks, then, they had to go and leave a note and haven't heard back. And I'm not blaming the counselors. The counselors have huge caseloads, or the fact that we only have a school psych on CART campus 1 day a week. And there's like one social emotional school psych, I think, for the entire Clovis East Rayburn complex. Like all the other school psychs are spending all of their time doing testing and evaluation because they just have these huge caseloads. And that's not good for kids. It's not good for kids. It's not good for the professionals because they feel like they're failing when they're doing the best they can to keep things afloat. And even administration, like I have a dean of curriculum who is available to come in and watch me teach and give me feedback and give me support and resources. And I know that my administrator at Clovis North, and I was lucky to have an administrator who had taught the subject that I was teaching, and she gave me really great feedback when she actually managed to get into my room. But it was a huge, campus, and it had a lot of responsibilities. And she was the LD for the high school English department and the junior high English department. And when was she going to be able to get in? So 90% of the time I was just throwing stuff at the wall to see if it stuck. And I don't want that. I don't want that for other teachers. I don't want that for new teachers. I don't want people coming in like I was, excited and bright and believing in CUSD, and then slowly feeling like you're failing at everything and leaving the profession. And I think that ACE can be the difference. I think that transparency, I think that feeling like even if you're heard, even if not all of these things change, and I know that they're not necessarily going to, but having a seat at the table where we feel like we're heard, and it's not just like, oh, let's survey about how you feel and then completely ignore that survey, which I feel like has happened time and time again.
It certainly has. And, I just want to highlight, something that you said there, because, some people might be surprised, right, that we're our message is clearly one of, partnership and not division. And, one of the things that I've seen since I've come back to the district in 2015 is just the complete lack of, administration connection to the classroom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And right, you're talking about Jennifer Enns, who was just an incredible English teacher, right? And has, had kind of a wealth of kind of wisdom and knowledge to share, right, with a young English teacher, but was so overwhelmed with what she was asked to do, right, that the classroom was the last thing that, and I'm just speculating here, but that, was just the last thing that she could get to. It might surprise people, but it would be nice to see our administrators in the classroom more often. Yeah. So that, not only so that they could help us with our craft, but so that they have a better kind of sense of what the classroom actually is.
Yeah, well, today, my co-teacher was doing a in-class debate. He arranged to do a debate of capitalism, anti-capitalism or pro-capitalism as part of his economics unit. And we had our CEO, the principal, were just like, hey, do you think you could come in and watch? I think it's going to be really cool. We tapped this student who's an ambassador, and he was able to take the time and just come watch this really cool thing that we were doing.
Yeah.
And it's like, I never would have been able to get, and I'm not saying it's their fault. I'm like, that's the thing. Like you said, Jennifer Enns had this wealth of knowledge, and she was one of the best administrators I've ever had. But they're overloaded too. Like, as nice as my principal was, or as nice as my LDs were, there wasn't that room for me to be just like, hey, come watch this neat thing. Right. Like, and maybe once. Yeah. But like, I've had him in my classroom watching neat things like 3 or 4 times just this semester. And it's cool. It's cool to have him see what we're doing. It's cool to get the feedback. It's cool to have things to bounce ideas off of. Well, what could we do differently? Or, hey, you know what? I connect this to this in this other lab. You should ask them what they're doing. And just having his awareness of that, and having, I know we're a much smaller site, so he has the ability to focus on that. But couldn't we manage to do something like that even at the big sites? Couldn't we manage to hire enough administrators to help really aid in curriculum instruction development, rather than just putting all these mandates on teachers and just letting them run their classrooms like little fiefdoms or something? I don't know.
All right. Yeah. So, it's a vision, right, for the
Mm-hmm.
future, right? And change is good. And, ACE is hopefully going to bring that change. So, Moira, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I've been really excited to, I think, share my perspective and the fact that I am a Clovis teacher and these things exist for me and they can exist for other people too.
Yes. Amen. All right. Thank you. Every episode, we want to kind of end by honoring the students we serve. So, Moira, tell us about the young people you serve.
So every year we do an advocacy project in the law lab. It kind of follows up our constitutional law unit where the kids are learning about the laws and then they get to learn about how to change them, or specifically policies. And each group picks an issue they feel that teens in the Central Valley face. And with the guidance of a mentor teacher and a mentor attorney from the local bar association, they actually propose policy change to a local organization. It could be their school district. Sometimes it's the city. We've had people propose to the county level or even local nonprofits. The project ends before winter break. And after the grades are given, a lot of groups end up dissolving or giving up because it can take a lot of time to get a policy developed. But I have a really awesome story about one of our groups. Started out as 7 CUSD and FUSD students who wanted to help teens in the LGBTQ plus community with having more inclusive curriculum in schools. And after the grades were given out, 2 students were left standing. Both happened to be Clovis Unified. And they stuck with the project and met with me outside of class time and ended up presenting before the Fresno Unified School Board a few weeks ago. I went with them that night and I was so proud to see these 2 students bravely stand up for what they believe in and ask for what they want. They're also some of my more shy students, so public speaking is not easy for them, but that didn't stop them. And they were rewarded not only with really awesome positive feedback from the board, but an on-the-spot promise of $1,000 to fund their project idea. And they want to make informational pamphlets for inclusion in sex education classes that discuss definitions of just general LGBTQ plus terms like gender and identity terminology. I mean, not even necessarily anything to do with sex, but just to give kids resources that they didn't have. And being able to support these 2 amazing students in changing their own world is probably, sorry, I'm getting teary, one of the best things about being a teacher.
Yeah, that's a great story. Yeah, and like you can hear kind of the pride in your voice. So, and we certainly know like the hard work that goes into kind of changing policy and changing a culture, right? And
oh yeah,
what courage for these 2 young people to go to a whole different school district and present to the board. Yeah, and be successful. That's amazing. All right, congrats to them, and then congrats to you.
Thank you.
Clovis educators, and all of you out there that have tuned in, we thank you for joining us in the conversation. To engage further, you can find us at www.cloviseducators.org and at our Instagram handle @ClovisEducators. Remember, there is nothing wrong about having this conversation. You cannot legally be punished for participating, asking questions, listening to this podcast, attending a meeting, and ultimately, if you choose to, signing the union support petition. These are your legally protected rights. We are ACE. We love Clovis Unified, and we will see you next time on the ACE Pod.